Hey everyone, welcome back to the Valleyridge Farm Channel. Today we're going to be talking about housing. We're going to talk about our own barn that we built. Just a little bit things to consider if you're looking to expand and build another sheep barn, or if you're looking to just get into sheep. What kind of a barn should you build, and why did we build the barn that we did? So let's have a look at what's going on here. This is the barn we built. It's a hoop structure with a tarp, of course, and so far it's been really good for us. We built this barn in 2015, and it was built on a pretty tight budget. We were just getting into sheep in a bigger way, and so this is basically what it looks like from the outside. Just to give you an idea, the dimensions are about 200 feet long by about 40 feet wide. The dimensions inside the barn for the alleyway is 10 feet, and on either side we got 15 feet. So if I were to say, is this ideal? No, it's not the most ideal. I would say your center alleyway should probably be 15 feet. And on the outside, I would say we probably should have 20 feet. But because this barn structure only came in 40 feet wide, we had to make do. And this was the best we could do. So yeah, the goal was to build a barn that held, at the time it was about 300 sheep. But in reality, all I fit in this barn is about 250 sheep with their offspring. So I try to do about 125 on a side. If we do that with their offspring, that works out to about 24 square feet per ewe, which is about what you want to have if you have lambs with their ewes. So that's kind of a rule of thumb, is anywhere from 20 to 25 square feet per ewe. And I think we're sitting at around 24. So that's just a rough idea of where we're sitting right now. Like I said, when I built the barn initially, it was to house 300, but the barn can't quite do that. So as you can see, we've got a center alleyway here where we do all our feeding. It works really well if you've got the kind of feeding system that requires a tractor and either a TMR or a bale buster, which is what we use. So we just drive down this center alleyway and feed on each side, and it works really well. Part of the reason it works well is because this alleyway is raised from where the sheep are actually housed. And as you can see here, we've got about, if you were to measure it, 15 inches from the bottom of this manure pack here to the top of the concrete right here, and then plus you got this 2x8 on the bottom. So these were built basically according to what the Omafra website shows. If you were to Google their website, that's basically what we did, and it works really quite well. The only problem we did have was with this scenario, without the conduit that we rigged up here, tons of lambs were getting out. So that's why we ended up doing this system, which works quite well. It's like these can lift up to when the ewe feeds, and of course it falls back down again when they're not, so that the lambs can't escape so easily. Some of the lambs have figured it out still. We still have a few corners as well that got to be filled in, but for the most part we can keep the lambs in this way. So of course there's many options and ways of doing things. This was just the way we thought we would do it. And as we go through this video, of course, just because I did it this way doesn't mean it's the only or the best way. It's just what we did. So we pail feed all our grain, because at this point we aren't doing TMR. But that was kind of the point of building this alleyway, was in the hopes that if we got to the point where we bought a TMR mixer, we wouldn't have to rebuild our whole feeding system here. So one of the other things that we have really liked about this barn is the way the head gates work. So not only for feeding, but also for just being able to open every gate. They're not necessarily built in. As you can see, there's a pin for each gate on each side. And this post is just bolted down on the ground here, like that. And just an L bracket. Maybe I should go to the other side, you can see it better. Just an L bracket like that. And then we also put these on this side if we wanted to run gates across the pen. But what it enables you to do is open the pen at any spot down the whole length of the barn, because each gate of course can swing open. either in or out. And so that allows a lot of flexibility when it comes to moving sheep around. One of the things we really love about this barn is how bright it always is. During the day, obviously you never need lights, even on a cloudy day. And it just makes for a really bright, airy environment. And so that is one of the beauties of a tarp barn. The other way we light the barn at night is we just ran string lights all the way down the barn, and we just zip tied them to the bars. And I think we did 2 rows, so 2 rows of, or 2 lines 100 feet each, joined in the middle, and just ran them down the length of the barn. It's not incredibly bright at night, but it's enough to do the job. What else can we talk about? Ease of clean out. That's a pretty big one. Being able to clean out the barn. Obviously, when you've got 50 plus sheep, in this barn we've got 250, you've got a lot of manure after a few months. So the way to get it out obviously is with a tractor or skid steer or something like that. And in our case, we use a tractor. So you're gonna wanna make sure that you've got nice big doors on each end of your barn, and half decent driveways or laneways on either end of your barn to stay out of the mud in the rainy seasons. So another thing to think about is where you put your barn. You wanna put your barn obviously on a well-drained area. So either build it on a raised grade from the area surrounding your barn, so that when we do get rain, it's not actually coming in the barn, it's actually draining away from the barn. Maybe that's a no-brainer, but it's just something to think about. The other thing is ease of access for your utilities, such as your water and your hydro. So you want to make sure that you're close enough to those things to make that possible. And for us, it was actually quite a nuisance. We had a lot of setbacks we had to abide by when it came to building codes and Conservation Authority, which is your environmental supervising body here. So all those two things really dictated where we could actually build this barn. And then we had to get power from actually our hog barn unit, and same with the water supply, and bring it to this barn, which really was not a small thing, but again, it worked. And we brought enough power here basically just to run your water bowls, your lights, your water pump, and stuff like that. But again, if we were to put a stationary TMR in here, we'd have to bring a lot more power here and that sort of thing. So we just did the bare minimum, I guess, which, you know, getting started, sometimes that's what you got to do. And really, that's why we built the barn we did. It was the biggest bang for your buck. And so that's where we're at. Having said that, there are a lot of people who will take a hog barn, such as what we got over there. Now, obviously, I've still got pigs in there, so I'm not set up to put sheep in there. But a lot of people will use old dairy barns, bank barns, hog barns, even chicken barns. Well, the nice thing about sheep is you can almost make anything work for sheep if you had to, and I guess that's the beauty of sheep farming. Having said that, there's so many ways of doing it that it's hard to tell someone, you know, if you do this, this is the best way. Anyway, those are some things we really enjoy about the barn so far. Now, what are some cons about the barn? I'm going to tell you for sure right off the bat. When we get a really big windstorm and that sort of thing, it makes me very nervous. It's held up in the ones we did have, and we've had some really major windstorms. But it just, you know, you never worry about barns like that on those windstorms compared to when you've got a barn like this. Just to give you some ballpark numbers as to what we paid when we built this barn, just for the hoops and for the tarp, it cost us about $40,000. So this is in 2015. So really it was quite economical at the time. And also remember, all this stuff was done on my own labor. We didn't hire someone to build it for the most part. There was a few little things in there, and I did have help from a cousin of mine who is very helpful when it comes to building stuff. For the most part, labor wasn't a big part of the expense of this building. So that's something you'd have to factor in when you're comparing, and quite obviously there's been huge inflation since this barn's been built, so the numbers are going to be quite different, but it just kind of gives you an idea. When it comes to the concrete alleyway, I think it was about $5,000 to $6,000 in just the material. And then the gates, again, not a huge expense because we built them ourselves. We bought the lumber. I did have all the brackets made at my brother's welding shop, and I did pay essentially full price for that. But wasn't a huge expense compared to buying fully manufactured gates. I don't remember the exact dollar figure for that, but I think it's somewhere in the $2,000 figure for all the lumber and all the welding of the posts and connectors and all that stuff. Then it came to waterers. When you think about watering for your barn, what you really want to consider is this barn going to freeze? Is the barn insulated? If it's not, obviously the best route is to put it underground, which is what we did in this barn. And we've got about 5 water bowls running down each side. And something to think about when you put your water bowls in is wherever your water bowls is going to dictate where your pens go and how big your pen size is. So because we've got 5 water bowls in here, we basically can only make 5 pens unless you plan to pail feed them with water. When you're designing it, you might as well make it the way you want it, and you want to eliminate things like hauling water pails if at all possible. So that's one thing to think about. Put your water lines underground. For one, they're out of the way and they're never at the risk of freezing, and makes for a much more trouble-free winter. This barn does not stay above freezing by any means. It's a barn that probably most people wouldn't build as a lambing barn, but I do indeed lamb in here. Actually, this past winter we lambed out 140 ewes, and that was in end of January, beginning of February, so really the dead of winter. It's not what I would call ideal. We make it work, put it that way. If you're looking for a frost-free lambing period, you're going to want to build something insulated, but again, your costs will be higher. So overall, I would say yes, I'm very happy with this barn. It's got its downsides. I would have liked to have built, if I had a budget for it, the heavier designed coverall buildings. This one here is basically a glorified greenhouse. What's nice about it is it still has the truss design, which many of these hoop structures don't necessarily have. But I think once you get into the 40 feet wide size of things, you're gonna have to almost have that truss design in order to have enough strength to withstand the wind and snow load. So if you're wondering where I got this barn was purchased from a manufacturer in St. Catharines, Ontario. And this place is called Omni Structures, and they just build these as cold frames for really any manner of reasons for why you'd want a structure like this, from livestock to growing plants and nurseries and all that stuff. So it was a good place to buy it. It's been good to me, but I think there would still be more peace of mind having just that heavier built, you know, Brightspan, Calhoun. There's a whole number of those companies out there now, which just build a somewhat sturdier, stronger structure, which kind of eliminates a little bit that concern about wind. Though in my mind, any tarp structure, there's that concern about wind. That's all there is to it. Having said that, I really enjoy the environment that this type of barn provides. Something else to consider when you're building is to make sure that when you build, you do have at least one spot which is warm. And as you can see, there's kind of this little add-on room here. And we built this just beginning of last year, I think. So at the beginning or sometime in 2021. And so we added this on because we were just always short on space where you had to keep stuff warm. And it's also very helpful for, you know, where you mix your colostrum and your milk replacer and all that stuff. You keep your tools and all your medicines and that sort of thing, where they got to be kind of kept out of the cold and the weather. And also a really good place to, if you have lambs that have gotten too cold and that sort of thing, you can bring them in there. Then you don't have to bring them in your house, right? And bring them in there, get them warmed up. You can, in our case, we've got our milk machine in there, where of course it can't freeze. So just having at least some area where you're gonna be able to keep stuff from freezing. And so we added this room on. We did have a little space in there before. It just wasn't enough space. Part of the reason it wasn't big enough was because we needed to have space here for this door. As you can see right here, we built this little room here, and it's very narrow and very small. And that's what we used for a few years, but it was just too small. So we added this little room on the outside here. The reason that room was so small is we needed space to be able to get through here with the tractor in order to clean out the barn. So just working all those things out is sometimes a big part of the planning process of your barn, but it will save you perhaps hours of labor year over year. And so it's good to think about these things beforehand. So overall, yes, I would build this barn again, and I would recommend it. And I think it's just a really good way to get into the industry, get started, and get your feet under you, and you can start moving forward with your sheep business. Thanks for watching this video. I hope this video helps you if you are looking at planning another sheep barn or a sheep barn for the first time. And for sure, if you have any questions further about this, you can leave them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to answer them as soon as I can. So thanks for watching.